Well, welcome to our third and final eAcademy session for the day. This is the 7 last words to the church. It's going to focus on Revelation 2 and 3, and it's being presented by Abram Kielsmeier-Jones, whom we often refer to just as Abram KJ, because it's not quite of a mouthful. And Abram is pastor of South End Neighborhood Church, a diverse urban church in Boston. He's a husband, father, runner, musician, wannabe basketball player, and follower of Jesus. He came to Accordance as a reviewer of Accordance 10 in 2012 and has been using it regularly ever since. Since 2015, he's led Accordance webinars on a variety of topics. So let me say a few words. We do have a handout, a PDF in the handout section. Abram also had a Workspace in a zipped file, and we've discovered that GoToWebinar does not allow us to put in zipped files for some reason. So I have created a forum post similar to what Mark Hoffman did on the previous webinar and posted some of his content there. I've created one for this session, and I will, in a few moments, I'll start putting in links. I'm going to add in the link to download that Workspace. I'm going to I'll put in some links for some of the specials that we have going on, and anything like that we need to go. That'll go in the chat box. We also have a separate question section. So if you have any questions along the way, if it's a question that I can answer, or Linda or Mark Allison can answer, we will do that. But the specific questions to Abram's topic that you want to ask, we'll hold those until the very end, and we'll have a Q&A session at the very end. So at this point, Abram, I am going to turn it over to you. I've been looking forward to this session.
Great, thanks so much, Rick, and thanks everyone for being here. Thank you, Linda and Mark, and all the other team who made this possible. And yeah, I'm also excited about this session. I had a lot of fun preparing for it. Not least because I'm actually in the middle of a sermon series right now at the church that I pastor on the 7 letters to the churches in Revelation. So I've been deep in these letters, which are wonderful. And what pleasantly surprised me as I prepared for this session is that Accordance is capable of even more than I've been using it for this sermon series. So I'm going to show you lots of different stuff about the book of Revelation and how Accordance can help us study it, especially the first 3 chapters. I'm going to go ahead and turn off my camera now, but I'll just wave to you so you can see me, and great to see everyone here. There is a handout that goes with this session, a PDF here, and I'll just use that to guide our time. The 7 last words to the church, and I titled it that. It's the same title as my sermon series, kind of a play on words. You think about the 7 last words of Christ from the cross. They aren't actually 7 words. They're 7 sayings or phrases, more than 1 word each. So the 7 last words to the church in Revelation, of course, God still speaks to the church today. But in terms of what we've got in the biblical account, these 7 letters, I've titled this the 7 last words to the church. So by way of session description, I'll just go over this briefly. You saw this if you signed up, but yes, you can find the beast, a dragon, and horsemen, and many more in the book of Revelation. But as interpreters have often noted, the book is first and foremost about Jesus. And we're going to begin by looking in depth at this phrase, the revelation of Jesus Christ, which is how the book begins. And we're going to spend some time on unpacking what that means and the implications for the whole book. After the book is about Jesus, detailed especially in chapter 1, it is a book about the church. And John shares a vision with 7 churches in Revelation 2 and 3 that still has import for the church today. And I will try to make at least a little bit of a case for why I think these letters are still applicable to today. So I'll lead this session on the first 3 chapters, all about Jesus, all about the church, how to maximize Accordance to get an overview and outline of Revelation 1 through 3. We will explore the vocabulary of those chapters, chapters 1 through 3, with special attention to the Greek. And I'll talk about commentaries on Revelation, and I will conclude with suggestions for how to preach and teach the first 3 chapters of the book. time permitting, I want to show you what I figured out, how you can compare the language of each of the letters to the other to see, for example, are there common phrases that come up in each of the 7 letters. So that will happen toward the end of the webinar, time permitting. And that's the really fun piece of accordance that I sort of puzzled over how to do that, and was able to come up with something and got some good help from Joel Brown, longtime accordance developer. And so I look forward to sharing that with you. That's the workspace that Rick mentioned. And so we'll get to that at the end. So let's begin here on this first point, that Revelation is from Jesus and it's about Jesus. Revelation is from Jesus and it's about Jesus. And so here's the Greek, and we have this word apocalypsis, from which we get apocalyptic or apocalypse. So it's the apocalypse, the revelation of Jesu Christu, of Jesus Christ. And this is the genitive case. And if you don't know Greek, that just means, well, it doesn't just mean, there's a lot of things it could mean, but genitive has to do with possession, or if something is originating from someone, or if it's pertaining to something. This of here is the genitive case. Well, the word of isn't there. It's built into the word, the u case ending. It's a genitive. So the relationship of the revelation to Jesus Christ is that Jesus is in the genitive case. So the first question we have, and I'll open accordance in just a moment to try to answer this, but the first question we have is, how is this genitive functioning? Or if you don't know Greek and you're reading this in English, even in English, the question is still relevant. What does the word of mean? The revelation of Jesus Christ. The word of is multivalent in English. In other words, it could mean multiple things depending on the context. And so we're going to dive into that in just a moment. But Revelation begins right here by saying this is, well, this is, the Greek verb is not in there, but it's implied as a sort of title of the book. Here is the revelation of Jesus Christ. And so that's the first question that we're going to look at, is what does it mean for the revelation to be of Jesus Christ? What is that word of? Or if you want to get into the Greek and the grammar, you can ask, how is the genitive functioning? So here are a couple of ways that we might go about answering this question. I'm just going to go to Revelation 1:1. You may notice, by the way, that I've got something that has never before been seen in accordance until all of us could update this recent update in 13.2. If you own Accordance 13, it's available to you. You've got a book title and section headings now. You can turn those off if you want to go back to how Accordance has always been, but by repeated and popular request, those are built in now to the text if you have that selected to display. So we can see here that we're in Revelation. I just typed in Revelation 1:1 to the search entry area. I'm in the NRSV, my default Bible text. And here I have the revelation of Jesus Christ. I'm going to open up a parallel Greek text just so we can see this in Greek. And here's what I copy and pasted into that the PDF handout. You've got Apocalypsis Jesu Christu. And when you hover over Jesu, here in the instant details, you can see it tells you it's genitive. Same thing with Christu, it's genitive. And so we've got the genitive case there. Opening the Greek doesn't answer my question, what does of mean? So in other words, if you came to Revelation starting in English, which I often do, even though I read the Greek text whenever possible, my question would be, what does of mean? Well, the Greek grammar doesn't answer it. It's ambiguous, at least initially, just like the English is. So the next step I might try, and I note this on the handout, is I might just compare Bible translations and see, do other translations, do I get something other than the word of that elaborates on just exactly what is the genitive doing here? What does it mean that this revelation is of Jesus Christ? And there are a number of ways that you can compare translations in accordance. You could just add parallel, go to texts. You could find any text that you wanted to from your drop-down list and go text by text that way. Another thing you can do is go to live click. So I'm going to check live click, and now this gear icon shows up. So I'm going to click that, which is a shortcut to preferences, and I'm going to go to verse lookup. You can keep the other lookup types checked, but once again, that's live click right here. Go to the gear icon and make sure that verse lookup is checked, and I'm going to click OK. And now I'm just going to click on this reference right here, Revelation 1:1. And now what I get is a verse lookup window that gives me Revelation 1:1 in all of my Bibles, so long as that Bible has a Revelation 1:1. So if it were a Hebrew Bible, obviously it wouldn't show. But any Bible that I've got that has Revelation 1:1 will show up here. So I could just make my way through these different translations, and I've got of. Here are some Greek manuscripts. I'm just going to go past those. Here's the Revelation of with a footnote, which doesn't answer my question. I've still got of in everything so far, and I'm just going to, so here's the NIV, the revelation from Jesus Christ. So from, in this sense, it looks like it's a more specific word. For the revelation to be of Jesus Christ, the NIV is translating that as it comes from Jesus Christ. And maybe that's the most common way that you use of anyway, or that you might have already thought. There are other ways to understand it, but we get from here, so that's helpful. So I've got this revelation is from Jesus Christ. Jesus is the source of what's in the book of Revelation. The vision is given to John, but it comes from Jesus. I'm just going to continue to scroll down here and see what else. It looks like I've just got from and of, and so that elaborates a little bit. But what about this meaning of where? What about pertaining to? Could it also mean the revelation pertaining to Jesus Christ, the revelation about Jesus Christ? That is a possible use of the word of. I want to speak to you today of accordances, great features. Well, that means I'm speaking to you about accordances, great features. And so the of there could mean about. I don't see that in any translations. And so the question becomes, how do I figure out this genitive case here? And lest you think this is spending way too long on just the first 3 words of the book, it actually sets up the book here. In fact, some commentators think this is a title, not just part of the verse, but that it functioned as a title. It's truly worth understanding what the word of is doing there. You could read in context to judge for yourself. Maybe the question is, okay, I've seen from, that revelation from Jesus Christ. So to read in context, I would just want to say, okay, is there anywhere beyond verse 1 where it looks like Jesus is speaking or Jesus is giving? Okay, well, here, John to the 7 churches. Well, that's John. And then here's Alpha and the Omega, the Lord. And as I scroll through, and I'm just kind of doing a fast forward version of this now, you get here Jesus speaking in chapter 1 already. And so you've got Jesus speak. Here it is, the Son of Man. And John gives this beautiful description of him, which is worth unpacking. And I wish we could do that together tonight. But there's lots of great stuff here. This how Jesus is depicted. But Jesus speaks here to John, and he says, "Do not be afraid. I am the first and the last. Now write what you have seen, what is and what is to take place after this." So it is clear then that the revelation of Jesus Christ is the revelation from Jesus Christ, because here you've got quotation marks to the angel of the church in Ephesus, right? And this is Jesus saying this. Jesus is speaking here to John. And in fact, if we had a Bible text with red letters for the letters of Christ, like the ESV with Strong's has that, you'll see those letters are in red. So this is Jesus speaking here. So we can confirm in Revelation 1:1, it is the revelation coming from Jesus Christ. However, there's this possible meaning of the revelation about Jesus Christ, that Jesus Christ is not just, I think it was Eugene Peterson who said this, he's not just the source of the revelation, he's also the content of the revelation. And if we wanted to explore that further, again, just the Greek alone is not answering the question for us, but context, whether in Greek or English, can really help flesh this out. So we know that revelation of Jesus Christ means the revelation that comes from Jesus Christ, but the revelation about Jesus Christ sure seems to make sense too, because as you scroll on through chapter 1, we get a revelation about Jesus Christ. In fact, here is a vision of Christ, of in the sense of, yes, it came from Jesus, but it was also a vision that pertained to Jesus, that was seeing Jesus. You might want to double check this against commentaries and Greek grammars and things like that. And obviously, this is the question that you want to answer for yourself. But let me just show one particular resource here that helps with this question about this genitive case, this apocalypsis Jesu Christu. What does it mean for this revelation to be of Jesus Christ? The NET Bible, you can just go to Add Parallel, and it'll be under Reference Tools, and that's going to be under should be under Translator Notes. And fortunately for us, this speaks directly to the question. And here it says the phrase apocalypsis Jesu Christu, and then here it's transliterated if you don't know Greek characters, could be interpreted as either an objective genitive, the revelation about Jesus Christ, that's the second thing we've been talking about, or a subjective genitive, the revelation from Jesus Christ, or both. That's called the plenary genitive. And then it gives some evidence here. It says it is clear that Jesus had sent his angel to proclaim the message to John. Thus the message is from Christ. And then you've got your grammatical category there, subjective genitive. On a broader scale, though, the revelation is about Christ. So this would be an objective genitive. And some grammarians have called this the plenary genitive. Now, if you don't know what the plenary genitive is, you can just highlight that, right click, go to research. I'm going to go to all tools and see what tools I have that speak to the plenary genitive. And that's going to give me a definition of this grammatical category. But basically, it's used in situations where it could be either one of these genitives. And in fact, it's not just that it's either one. It may quite well be that the author intended both. That this, just like in English. So you don't need to know Greek to get at this. It's just like the English word of. That it's, in my view, I think it's highly likely that John was saying that this is the revelation coming from Jesus, and it's a revelation about Jesus. So my research search gave me a few sources that have plenary genitive. Here's the Pocket New Testament Greek Dictionary, and it said basically what the NET note said. So I didn't get a whole lot there, but you've got other sources, and if you've got grammars, like Wallace's Greek grammar, he's got his section on the genitive is quite long, and he's got some. In fact, hey, look at this. Here's Revelation 1:1. It is in Wallace's Greek grammar as an example of a plenary genitive. And this is funny because I didn't actually read this until today. It looks like I highlighted this a while ago. But he's asking the same question: is this the revelation that comes from Christ? Or is it about Christ? And his answer is, it seems like it's both. So I share all that because it's important, I think, in setting the stage that revelation is from Jesus. In other words, the stuff in this book is revealed by him, and it's about Jesus. In other words, we're going to learn more about who Jesus is, and the source is Jesus Christ himself. Now, this, I think, really preaches, or at least I've preached it. I don't know how. I always pray that the sermons are, that God's word does not return to him empty, but accomplishes that for which he purposes it. And I believe that, which is why I keep preaching every week. And so I've preached this as I preached Revelation, that I think it's important to know that Revelation is from Jesus. And so these are words of Jesus Christ himself. In other words, it's not just the Gospels that have recorded words of Jesus. It's not just the Gospels, but Revelation has Jesus Christ quoted verbatim, directly, and it's about Jesus. It's content about Jesus. It's depictions of Jesus. It's descriptions and character traits and actions and attributes and all the rest. And so this is a good, and I'm kind of jumping ahead a little bit to the preaching and teaching Revelation. This is the last point tonight, but I'll just say it here that in preaching Revelation, I found this is a good place to start, because as I noted in the session description, some of these other figures get a little bit more publicity out of Revelation, and they're in it, and we need to understand those passages. I'm not downplaying that, but it can be a problem when other characters overshadow Jesus, whom the book is primarily about. And the description here says that this is the revelation about Jesus Christ, and it's from Jesus Christ. Yes, you're going to hear about other characters, other churches, other evil forces, but this book wants to point us to Jesus. And that's an important grounding, I think, for preaching and teaching the book. So we just dipped into accordance a little bit to get at that, but just these three words, there's quite a lot here. And so I will not spend as much time on the second point, but similarly, just as Revelation is about Jesus and just as Revelation is from Jesus, Revelation is for the church. It's for the church. And I would say then and now. You've got in 1:1 his servants, and in 1:3, blessed are those who hear this prophecy. And then more explicitly in Revelation 1:4, you've got to the churches. Let me close this other stuff. You've got to John to the 7 churches that are in Asia. So this letter or this book, Revelation, is explicitly addressed to 7 churches. And so it is a book that is for the church then, and I would suggest it's a book that's for the church now. There's a whole world of biblical interpretation and principles of responsible and faithful interpretation that are important to consider. But one thing that compels me is, as we'll see as we go on, each of the 7 letters ends with "Hear what the Spirit is saying to the churches," plural. Hear what the Spirit is saying to the churches. Here it is right here. Here's the word churches. And you can even see in the instant details that it's confirming. You've got a plural in the Greek. Hear what the Spirit is saying to the churches. So it's possible that, most directly, each one letter was meant to be circular and go to all the other 7 churches. But that's already hinting at a universality to each individual letter, even though the heading says the message to Smyrna. Now Jesus, through John, says, hear what the Spirit is saying, not just to Smyrna, but to the churches. And so I think it's perfectly appropriate interpretation to say not just Smyrna, but all 7 churches should listen to the message to Smyrna, and not just the 7 churches in John's day, in the late first century, but also in the 21st century today. So Revelation is about Jesus, it's from Jesus, and it is to the church, it's for the church, both then and now. Let me talk about a few Revelation commentaries in accordance that I think are helpful. There is G.K. Beale's New International Greek Testament Commentary volume, and then there's a shorter Beale, which is the affectionate nickname. It's an abridgment of the first volume, and I'll just show you those in accordance. If I type in Beale in my library, I get this NIGTC volume. Here's what it looks like. And here is the Revelation volume in that series. And then this is just called Beale on Revelation, which is Revelation, a shorter commentary. It's the same publisher, so they condensed what's in the Greek commentary. I preached on Revelation, I think 4 years ago, not using the NIGTC, but just using the shorter commentary. And I didn't think I was missing anything. There's a ton there, even in the abridgment. Now I'm preaching through Revelation again, and I am appreciating the longer commentary. So I'm not sure a person needs to have both, but they're both there in accordance, both the full Beale and the shorter Beale. And just to give you just a little sneak preview of this, you can open all of these commentaries in the info pane right next to the verse in question. So if I'm in Revelation, let's just go to Revelation 1:4. If I go to add parallel and info pane, I can open my commentaries that way. And I've got these ordered in my library so the Beale comes up first. And this will be basic for some of you, but for those of you who haven't used the info pane, if I hover over the book cover image, I get some information in the instant details, or I can even click it open and it opens in a parallel pane, or I can hold down Command or Control on Windows and click it open, it goes into a new zone. Lots of different ways you can access this, but this is the way that I most frequently reference these commentaries, is that I'm in a verse and I want to know what's going on. In fact, I might want to just go to Revelation 1:1. You'll notice that this zone stayed with me because it's tied now to this zone. Right away, you've got, it starts with the revelation of Jesus Christ. So of course, you would expect the commentary to treat that. And so you can see what he says here. In fact, he just puts this into one or two sentences, that it could mean the revelation from, the revelation about, or both may be included. So you can access these commentaries through your info pane, you can also access them on their own. So I've got this in its separate zone. I could just, I could even close this zone here just to show you this. And let's say I want to search for, I don't know, the word dragon. Maybe you saw my session description and want to see, oh, I didn't remember there was a dragon. Who is the dragon? So you can toggle the search field in any commentary, and you can search it for words or titles or references, manuscripts, page numbers. There's lots of ways that you can search these. So even if you're most often using it in parallel to a given Bible text that you've got open, you can also search any of your commentaries however you want to. Maybe I want to see, what does he say about Smyrna here? Not just in that section, but all throughout the book. And so I can do that. In fact, here's the first hit. It's in the introduction. And so that wouldn't have shown up in my info pane or as I was looking at those in parallel. So that's another way that you can access the commentaries. The SIL exegetical summary is another really helpful commentary, and I'm just sort of breezing through these and realizing that if you want to check these out more, you can look at the product descriptions in the Accordance store. The SIL exegetical library is another excellent resource, and that is right here. It is the Summer Institute of Learning. Let me just get to the copyright information here at the very beginning to show you. I guess I have to go all the way up to the top to find that. Here's the book cover image. It looks like this for each of the volumes. So I'm going to go to Revelation 1:1, and this resource, I can't speak highly enough of it. It basically gives you this lexical information. So any word that you may have a question about, it will. All these abbreviations are different lexicons, or they are different commentaries. And it will share how those lexicons and commentaries define this word. It's exactly what it says. It's exegetical summary. So it's taking all of these resources and summarizing them. So what does the word apocalypsis mean? Well, revelation, account of a revelation, disclosure. This noun is also rendered as a clause or phrase, what God showed to Jesus Christ. That's interesting. Apocalypsis means something made known that could not have otherwise been discovered. So this is back to preaching and teaching accordance. You can say, if you're preaching about revelation being from Jesus and about Jesus, one of the points of application is that this book teaches me things about God, things about Jesus, things about the church that I could not have otherwise figured out on my own, because it's a revelation, it's a disclosure. It's given. It's something that's a gift. It's given to you, and so there are preacherly or homiletical implications for that, devotional implications. You can give God thanks for that, or however you want to preach or teach that. But this resource is great because already, just in looking at this one word, I've already got some preaching ideas. It generally anticipates just about any question that I ever have of a text. So here's this question that we've been looking at. This is the SIL exegetical summary series. How are the nouns related in the genitive construction apocalypsis Jesu Christu, revelation of Jesus Christ? And so it summarizes all of these resources. You can hover over them and see in the instant details what are these resources that are being mentioned. And in fact, if I've got these resources installed, my hyperlink here, you can see in this case, it's actually linking to the entry in the commentary itself, which is really great. But it says God is the source of the revelation, Christ is the revealer. Here you've got, it's a revelation to Jesus Christ from God, and it means both that Jesus is the one who revealed and that it comes from him. So he's both the content and the source, as Eugene Peterson puts it. And you're going to find it, this exegetical summary series, it doesn't very often say, here's what we think. It just says, here are how a bunch of resources have answered that question. And so it's really useful. And then you can sort of just do, make your own conclusion. And so you've got even here, and to whom does to his servants refer? And so some people say believers in the church, others say Christian prophets. And this resource is just excellent to take you verse by verse through Revelation and lots of other books. So I would recommend that as a useful guide for getting through Revelation. Another good one is the IVP Bible Background Commentary, and I'll just give you a short preview of that. That has, it focuses especially on information that you might not be able to get even with the best knowledge of Greek and grammar and syntax and vocabulary, and even with the most careful read, even if you had read the book through 10 times yourself, there's still going to be some historical information that just isn't included in the book. So for example, right off the bat, most apocalypses were attributed to meritorious Old Testament characters of the distant past. Like Old Testament prophetic books, Revelation is written by a contemporary apostle who does not need such a pen name. He writes to real congregations to know him, whereas other apocalyptic literature did not name specific recipients or use the epistolary form. So that's useful to know, just that there's something about this that this is real, and real John and real churches, and no need to use a pen name or anything like that. And you'll get lots of other stuff in this background commentary, how the word witness was used in the first century in ways that might overlap with today or might not. So that's another good commentary that I would recommend. I talked already briefly about using commentaries in the info pane. So when you've got your Bible open to Revelation, whatever the verse is, you can open up the info pane and see all of your commentaries that will follow you throughout the book. And as you scroll through Revelation, as I'm doing on my trackpad here, your info pane will follow you. You'll notice those study Bibles, they look like they're jumping around, but that's just because they may have comment on one verse but not the other. And if it has a comment, it will show up. This info pane is verse specific. So if you've got any commentary or study Bible, or for that matter, this does grammars and apparatuses, if you've got it, and if it addresses the verse in question, it will show up here in the info pane. But you can also just open up the commentaries separately and search them like you would any other books. And you may want to do that, especially as you are doing an introduction or beginning a book. Maybe you want to trace a theme and see how your commentator talks about it. There are so many commentaries on Revelation. I've only mentioned 3, really. This one is Beale, whether in its unabridged or abridged form, G.K. Beale. The SIL Exegetical Summary, the IVP Bible Background Commentary. A really good source for seeing commentaries is bestcommentaries.com. It's a review aggregator, and so that, the reviews are subjective, at least to a large degree. So you're going to get this rating system that, again, take it with a grain of salt, but you'll get a pretty good idea of at least what are the most favorably reviewed commentaries on Revelation if you navigate to that page. And you can always go to the Accordance forums and say, hey, I'm preaching on Revelation, or I'm teaching a Bible study, or leading a class, or writing a paper. What would you recommend? And we've got users around the world, so at all hours, probably you'll get a response depending on the topic. But often these kind of topics come up in the forum, so that's another place that you can go to check out commentaries. Let me talk about section headings. You've seen those already popping up in my Accordance. These are new to Accordance 13.2. And the section headings by default are on once you update to 13.2, but you can turn them off. But let's just say you want them on. Now Accordance looks like your print Bible. And this may not be shocking. I mean, it's not a new technology. It is a new technology in Accordance, so especially longtime users might particularly appreciate this. But now as I'm going through Revelation, if I start in Revelation 2, I'm just going to make my font small for a moment. But now I can see here very easily the breaks with the different letters. So I've got the message to Ephesus, the message to Smyrna, the message to Pergamum, the message to Thyatira. Those are the first 4, and that's chapter 2. Here's chapter 3, continuing on with Sardis, Philadelphia, and Laodicea. So those headings are really helpful. If I were, for example, going to decide, well, this isn't theoretical for me, but I didn't have section headings in Accordance before. So let's say right now you say tonight you want to preach on Revelation 1 through 3. And so you could look through these section headings and say, all right, that's how I want to outline it. Week 1 is going to be whatever the first letter is. So that's Ephesus. Week 2 is this next heading, Smyrna. Week 3 is Pergamum. And I trust you know that the original manuscripts did not have section headings like this. So there is a degree of interpretation involved in deciding where one section ends and the other begins. So this is not to keep you from doing your own work to figure out where passages begin and end. But especially in Revelation 2 and 3, it's nice and clear because it's a compilation of 7 letters. So there's really not much question about where a letter begins and ends. The bigger question might be, if you were preaching Revelation 1, how were you going to split that up? And you can see here that this NRSV heading, Introduction and Salutation, it's not terribly descriptive. And then in verse 9 all the way through verse 20, you get a vision of Christ. You can even compare other Bible texts that you've got to see what their section headings are given as. So I'll take the NIV 2011. So here's John's vision of Christ. So they're going to overlap quite a bit. I think Revelation 1:1, yeah, they just call it the prologue there. But the letters to the churches, you're going to see the same division there, generally speaking, in terms of how the sections are split up. And that's important for outlining a book. Like I say, Revelation 2 and 3 is pretty straightforward in how you outline it. As the book goes on, it may become less straightforward. Or if you're preaching through a gospel or an epistle, you may want to think about how to outline it. Now, you can do that yourself by reading through the book carefully, but it's also helpful to check that against these section headings, which until now, you'd have to go into other software or website or a print Bible to get those. But those are now here in Accordance. So as long as you are using Accordance 13.2, that's going to be available to you, which I think is really helpful. Another good tool, if you want to understand how to outline and split up different chunks of scripture, is Outlines of Bible Books. And I'll just show that to you. Go to Add Parallel Pane. It's under Reference Tools and Biblical Studies, and it's Outline of Bible Books. If you can't remember that, all you need to do is go type in Outlines of Bible Books, and you can click it open here in a separate pane, but you can also add it as a parallel pane. Now it will show up in your recent modules. So there it is. You need to make some more screen real estate. So there's Outlines of Bible Books. And not surprisingly, this is just outlined as 7 points in chapters 2 and 3. And there's a little bit of a more detailed outline here with chapter 1. We get the introduction, the salutation and doxology are split off. But this is not, verse by verse outline. You may find that in some of your commentaries. So again, if your goal is to figure out in advance how many sermons am I how many weeks am I going to use to preach through Revelation 1 through 3, you could just open up Beale. Let's just use the shorter Beale for this. And for this, I would just go to the introduction and I would see if he's got anything like an outline. And sure enough, here is the outline and plan of Revelation. Now, this is a really broad outline, and so this is not helping me to figure out how I might want to split up Revelation 1 through 3. And probably you want to answer that question for yourself anyway. But if you scroll through here, you'll see if he's got anything else that talks about his outline, or you could check out another commentary. You might do, let's try the word biblical commentary, see what that's got on Revelation for the outline. I'm just opening this and just kind of browsing my way here. You can also search for the word outline, but it looks like there will probably be something somewhere in here. Here's the text or the inscription. And in fact, with Accordance, you've got the outline itself with these commentaries is sort of built in with these expandable, collapsible triangles. So I'll stop there in talking about the outlines of the books, because again, this is something you could do on your own. You could just follow the section headings. You could do your own thing and cross-check it against that. You could check your commentaries, and there's plenty of great Revelation commentaries that I haven't even mentioned that may have a really good 3-page outline that you want to use and that's going to help you. Once you get into the letters themselves, it will be useful to outline the letters themselves. And so, and ask the question, do these letters follow a similar pattern from letter to letter? And if so, that's something I might want to point out to my congregation as I'm preaching, or to my class as I'm teaching, or just to myself as I'm studying. That would be interesting to know. Fortunately for us, Accordance can answer that question with a pretty good amount of precision. So we'll come back to that in just a moment. So far, just to recap, we have looked at Revelation as being from Jesus and about Jesus. So Jesus is both the source and the content of this extended vision, these series of visions that John has. Revelation is for the church then, and I think now as well. I've recommended a few Revelation commentaries in Accordance, and I've given you some other places to go to learn more. We talked just briefly about section headings, outlines of Bible books, and how you might make your way through commentary introductions to get an idea of how Revelation 1 through 3 is outlined, and other books, of course, that this will work for as well. Let's talk about Greek vocabulary. As I said, one of the questions that I have is, are there similarities between letters? Is there overlap? Are there words that occur a lot in Revelation 1 through 3 that I would want to be attuned to? Accordance can answer that question with great detail. Revelation 1 through 3 is going to be the corpus that we look at here. You could do this with the whole book, but we're going to use the range command for this. And this is just to ask the question, what are all the words that occur in Revelation 1 through 3? And we're going to want to see them in order of frequency. So what occurs the most frequently in Revelation 1 through 3 down to words that only occur one time. This is really easy to do in Accordance. And you've just got two basic operators that you need to be aware of. So I'm going to go back to Accordance. I'm going to open up a Greek text. You could do this with any Greek text. In fact, you could do this in English too if you wanted to, but I promised in the session that we'd focus on Greek for this part especially. So I'm going to make sure that my search field is toggled to words. I'm going to do the asterisk key, which is Accordance's wildcard key. It means give me everything. So if I hit enter, it might take a little, I guess it didn't take a little while. That returned hits for every word in all of the New Testament. Now, this red and bold here, these are not words of Jesus. These are hit results for the search asterisk. This showed me every word in the whole New Testament. Now, that by itself doesn't necessarily seem like a very useful search, but it will be once we use the analytics. I want to narrow this down though to Revelation 1 through 3. So to do that, I'm going to use the range command. For the range command, I can access it in a number of different ways. You just need to know one way. I can right-click, enter command, and go to range. So I right-click from the search entry area, enter command from the menu that came, and then range. There's a keyboard shortcut there. I could go to search, enter command, and range. I could also just start typing, R-A-N-G-E. Now, Accordance, this is, well, maybe it's not funny. I think it's kind of funny, but Accordance doesn't know if I'm what I want yet. And in fact, it's doing the right thing because I'm in a Greek text and because I'm searching words, it thinks Greek letters. So it gives me R-A-N-G-E in Greek, but it also is smart enough to say, well, maybe Abram wants a command here, or maybe the user wants a command, and so anthropomorphizing Accordance, of course. But here's the range command that you can access that way. However you get the range command, now you've got a question mark, and so the question mark indicates that you can enter your range here that you want. And so I'm going to say Revelation 1 through 3. And now I've got the same search that I just did with the asterisk for the New Testament, but now my search is limited to Revelation 1 through 3. It stops at the end of chapter 3. In fact, you can see here there are 72 verses and 1,618 words. Now that means not unique words. That means 1,618 words if you were to just count one by one, left to right. Again, that in and of itself, semi-useful information perhaps, but what's especially useful is if I go now to the analytics function here, and I'm going to go to word count totals, and I'm going to go to analysis. I've put this in the handout as well. And this is going to analyze these hits. And this is where these hits become useful. As a text I'm reading through, there's no difference between one word or the other. But if I'm actually doing some analysis on the words, now I can see, again, here's that same information, total number of verses, 72, 1,618 total words, 353 different forms. So that's 353 unique word forms, and that's not roots, because you'll notice here that agapao, the verb, is counted differently from agape, the noun, but 353 distinct, discrete word units in those 3 chapters. Now, again, it's interesting to have this alphabetical, but I can get even I can get even closer to what I want and do count down. So let me just do that again. Asterisk, do it from scratch just to make sure. Asterisk, range, Revelation 1 through 3. Once the text turns from black to gray, that means the search has been run. Analytics, word count totals, analysis, count down is how I want to sort it. And now what I've got is a list of words, and I can do, I could export this to Excel or a text file or something like that. But now I've got a list of words in the order of frequency as they occur in the first 3 chapters. And what I would want to do at this point is skim through this and say, okay, are there any words here that come up a lot that I might want to do a word study on before I go through the 3 chapters? And some of these words like ha and kai and autos, and ego, these may not be ones that you want to study. Maybe ego is significant just because it's self-referential. So that might be worth paying attention to. In other words, who is the I who's speaking here? And we know it's Jesus. And so unless someone else is being quoted, that might be worth paying attention to. But you can scroll through this and see what words stick out to you as relevant ones, like lego. So there's speaking. Here's one, ecclesia, congregation or assembly or a church. It occurs 19 times in the first 3 chapters. So yeah, the first 3 chapters are definitely about the church. In fact, we might wonder, okay, is ecclesia, is the church only mentioned or mostly mentioned in the first 3 chapters? You can even go in here and delete the range of the chapter and just do range revelation. Your analysis window will automatically update. And now you can scroll through and see a word list of words in Revelation. You've got angelos occurring 67 times. I have to scroll down a little farther to find ecclesia now. So maybe that word has a higher concentration in the first 3 chapters. And you could even find there are even particular tools that would help you see that more precisely. But I just want to introduce you to this tool if you're not already aware of it, this analysis tool, in this way to see what are the words that are most frequently occurring in the book. So here's ecclesia in the whole book. I'm just going to go back to Revelation 1 through 3. So it really is much higher concentration early on than later in the book. But let's take this word ecclesia. From the analysis window, you can triple click on it, 1, 2, 3, to get a search for ecclesia in the Greek New Testament coming up. And so now I'm seeing not just ecclesia in Revelation 1 through 3, but in all of the Greek New Testament. If that's of interest to me, I can look at that word all throughout the New Testament if I want to study how is that word used already for decades before the churches in Revelation would have heard it. What would they have understood for John, for Jesus through John to call them ecclesia? Lots of fun stuff you can do with analysis. I'd love to keep going with that, but I want to talk about some other stuff as well. But that's how you do Greek vocabulary. You can get a frequency list that way, searching for asterisk with whatever your range is, then viewing the analytics, and I've just jotted down in here word count totals, analysis, and then sort by count down. And then you can triple click on a form to see its occurrences. All right, here's the part I'm most looking forward to about this webinar, with all due respect to all the other parts of this session. How do you use accordance to compare the 7 letters? The 7 letters are Revelation 2, 1 through 7, Revelation 2, 8 through 11, 2, 12 through 17, 2, 18 through 29, 3, 1 through 6, 3, 7 through 13, and 3, 14 through 20. Now, I would have found that out by now any number of ways, whether it was through the section headings or through my own outlining or through reading, or I probably will have a commentary introduction that says, here are the references to the 7 letters. This information is not going to be hard to come by. So I'm going to assume that you've got that to begin with. So what I want to do now is I want to go a step farther than just what I've done here. It is useful to know, for example, what words occur most frequently in the early part of Revelation. In fact, maybe an even better search is Revelation 2 through 3, so that I'm searching just the letters to the churches and seeing what words occur most frequently there. And you've got I and speak, lego and me, to be, ecclesia, didomai, to give, ergon, work, that comes up 12 times, so that's important. And this is a good list and everything, but what this list isn't doing is actually comparing letter to letter. So I'm going to show you how to do that. And I just want to preface this by saying I think this is drawing on Accordance's more advanced capabilities. The session is recorded. So if you feel like you're not tracking with the whole thing, you'll have access to the recording and can go back and watch it. And just I'll say by way of full disclosure that it took me a while and some help from other people to figure out how to do this, but it is possible. And now that I know how to do it, it's really great. So let me show you how to set up a workspace where you can compare the 7 letters to each other. In fact, I've got a saved workspace here, and I'm going to start with that, and then we're going to work our way backwards. So I'm going to go to File, Open Workspace, and it's called 7 Churches Infer. All right, there it is. Now that actually doesn't look that complicated, and maybe it was just my lack of knowledge that it took me so long to figure this out. But what I want to do is compare the letters to each other. And so what I've got in the left-hand zone is 6 out of 7 letters. So these are going to be the letters to which I'm comparing a given letter. And so we're just going to start out by saying, okay, here's letters 2 through 7, because let's say I'm preaching on the first letter, or I'm studying the first letter. So I'm going to put the references to the 7 letters in this tab here. And you know what? We can just build this from scratch because that might be more useful. So I'm just going to copy and paste that reference list here, and I'm going to run the search, and that's all 7 letters. So I'm going to take out 2, 1 through 7. And we're going to get 6 letters here. All right, so now I'm going to open up a new tab, and I'm going to do the NRSV again. We'll do this part in English. And I'm going to rename this tab. So right click, rename tab, other 6 churches. And I'm going to rename this tab one church, or church I am studying, or something like that. So in the left now, I've got all of the churches, the letters to all the churches except the one that I want to study, which is Revelation 2, 1 through 7. But I want to add to that. I want to do more than just show Revelation 2, 1 through 7. What I want to do is compare the language of Revelation 2, 1 through 7 to the language of the rest of the letters. In other words, this is going to be my letter that I'm focusing on. Here's all the rest. And I want to compare what's here on the right to what's here on the left. So this much is easy enough to set up. You've just got references. You're just typing in a string of references here and another reference here. What's going to do this work for me, what's going to join them together, is the infer command. And I've got it here. I've got the syntax here in the workspace. I actually have it in your handout as well. So the infer command is going to allow me to and this is straight from the help files. The infer command is used to find allusions or inferences between texts in 2 tabs using the same set of characters. In other words, you cannot do Greek to English. It has to be English to English, or Greek to Greek, or Hebrew to Hebrew, using the same set of characters. The infer command is used to find allusions or inferences between texts in 2 tabs. So I'm going to go back here now. And I'm going to remember for a moment, I want to keep this on Revelation 2, 1 through 7, but for now, I'm just going to type in infer. Same thing as the range command. You can go to enter command, infer, got a keyboard shortcut. You can go to search and enter command, infer, or you can just start typing infer. I'm going to hit enter. And now it says select infer tab. So in other words, what is the tab that you want to compare to? And I want to compare to the other 6 churches. So I'm going to select that because I've got other tabs open, and that's why I renamed that. And I'm just going to leave these settings for now. If you want to look through the help files, if you go up here to the Accordance help, there's some advanced documentation on adjusting the parameters of the infer search. I'm not going to go into that tonight, but it's there if you want to. I'm just going to go with the default. And now it's going to do infer other 6 churches. Infer 6, that's just sort of like the depth, the number of words that it includes, and you can change that number to get depending on how much correspondence you want. Now that search is going to show me actually all throughout the Bible where there's language that's similar to these other 6 letters, but that's not what I want. That may be, well, it may be what you want, but I want to get back to Revelation 2, 1 through 7 now. So now I'm going to add the range command, and I'm going to do Revelation 2, 1 through 7. So this is it. This is how you do what I want to do. You get the 6 letters here, the other 6 letters, then the one under consideration here, preceded by the range command. And then I'm inferring other 6 churches here. And so now let's look at these results. I've got, to the angel of the church in Ephesus, write, these are the words of him who, and so I can see right here, Revelation 2:8. These are the words of, there's overlap there. I know your works. I bet I don't have to go very far before I get to another, I know your works, but it occurs somewhere in this window. Patient endurance, I know that. But I have this against you. So this tells me again, it occurs in Revelation 2, 1 through 7, but somewhere else in these letters, another church is hearing, I have this against you. And sure enough, here it is, the church in Thyatira. If not, I will come to you. So there's a consequence. And then what's most interesting, I think, is all of this overlap here. Let anyone who has an ear listen to what the Spirit is saying to the churches. To everyone who conquers, I will give. You've got, in fact, this occurs at the end of every letter. Let anyone who has an ear listen to what the Spirit is saying to the churches. And you often have this language of conquering. Now we can go a step further. If your question is, all right, well, this is cool. So I'm seeing in Revelation 2, 1 through 7, common language, so words that occur in the other letters, but where, you could scroll through this, but I don't have any bold and red here. So where is this stuff occurring? Well, you can actually do, it's called the search back. It's kind of like, I don't know if backwards infer is the right way to phrase it, but you could take this phrase, let anyone who has an ear listen to what the Spirit is saying, or just take a part of it that looks like it will be unique. And now I'm going to right click, and I'm going to go to search back linked text, and that's going to open up a new tab. And now it's going to show me where that phrase occurs in this corpus. So I just right clicked and did search back, and it filled all this in for me. It filled in the phrase, it put the and connecting command, it put the contents command, which gives me all of the stuff that's in this tab. And it gave me the tab name, other 6 churches. So now I can see, let anyone who has an ear listen to what the Spirit is saying to the churches. In fact, let's just take this whole sentence because it's all in red. So let's try this again. Right click, search back linked text, and look at this. I've got 6 verses, 6 hits. Remember, the contents of this are the other 6 letters, and the first one is here. So I have just used accordance to prove, without scrolling through, which you could do or skim through on your own, but I've just used accordance to definitively find out this phrase, let anyone who has an ear listen to what the Spirit is saying to the churches, shows up in all of the letters to the churches in Revelation. In fact, that's how it ends, although it's not the last word in a couple of these letters, because you get the to anyone who conquers in a couple letters, but they all say that. And again, this is back to why I was suggesting that I think Revelation is relevant, not just for each church that got the letter, but more universally. You've got churches plural, and this repeating, let anyone who has an ear, there's something that calls on the listener of the text whenever and wherever they are. By the time you're through the 7 letters, you, and I mean you, the person who is here right now, you have heard, let anyone who has an ear listen to what the Spirit is saying to the churches. So at some point, I am assuming that Jesus and John, in their great wisdom, were thinking, this is for more than just these 7 churches. It is definitely for these 7 churches, and they have their own context and history that we have to understand, and that's important. We need to be responsible in interpreting the text and not taking it beyond its intent, but it would seem to me anyway that the intent here is a more universal one in terms of let the whole church hear this. Let every church at every time and every place hear these and see, where do you hear your church in this? And that's a pastoral implication. Where do you see your life in this? Have you abandoned your first love? Have you forgotten to do the works that you did at first? And then there's encouragement too. Here are things you have done well. You cannot tolerate evildoers. And so you can imagine all the possibilities for preaching and thinking about how this applies. Let's just do one more search back linked text here. I have this against you. So I'm going to take that text, I'm going to highlight it because I can see here that there's, because it's an infer hit, I know for sure it's in other letters. Let me just see where. So right click, search back linked text. And there's that same search, have this against you, and contents of the other 6 churches. And it's in Revelation 2:20. And I could now slide this context slider further and further to see, okay, that's Thyatira. So Jesus has something against the church in Ephesus and something against the church in Thyatira. And maybe he had something against the other churches too. We don't know. These are just the ones that he explicitly said. So that's what the search backlink text gave me. And so that's a useful way for me to see where this other stuff is coming from. Same thing with the everyone who conquers. So where else am I getting everyone who conquers? So I just select that text, right click, search backlink text, and it's in 2 other churches. So there are 3 churches where this to everyone who conquers is mentioned. So I think that's really fun. And this doesn't have to dictate everything about the preaching. Each letter, I think, needs to be understood and preached and studied and taught on its own, which I think is something that the preacher would want to keep in mind. But at the same time, the comparison can be useful, if for no other reason than for you as someone who is studying or teaching or preaching this stuff to understand how these letters connect. And in fact, I would say in going through Revelation and these letters to the churches, it would be vital to point out that this phrase or this sentence occurs at the end or toward the end of every letter. Now, this is just Revelation 2:1-7. So let's say I've preached that passage and now I'm going on to the second letter. So what I would do now with this workspace, and I have saved this workspace so that I don't have to set it up each time. Now I would just change the references. So now the other 6 churches are going to be 1 in Numbers 3-7. So the first church is Revelation 1-7. Notice the text turned black, so I haven't run this search yet. And now the church in question is 2:8-11. So hit enter on both searches, and same thing. I've got anything in the second letter to the church in Smyrna, anything that occurs elsewhere in any of the other letters shows up here. The angel of the church, so I can take that and see where that is, right click, search backlink to text. And in fact, there's another thing that comes up in every letter, the angel to the angel of the church, right? That's in all 6 of the other letters, plus the second letter that I'm studying. These are the words. I think you're going to see that in every other letter. Those who say they are Jews and are not. So right click, search backlink text, and you can see that that's in this letter in Revelation 3, which is to Philadelphia. You're not surprised to see verse 11 here. So that you may be, you can search that link text, and you can continue this process as an iterative process. Now you move on to the third letter, and so the reference for that is 2:12-17. So you just swap those and take that here, verse 2:12-17, take that out there and replace it with 8-11. I trust this is making sense, and now you've got the same thing here. This is a letter to the church in Pergamum, and you see there's actually quite a lot of overlap here. By the way, when you're doing this search, keep in mind, it looks like there are missing verses here. There are not actually missing verses. There are only verses that have relevant hits. You'll want to make sure, I haven't been doing this all the time just now, but you'll want to make sure to slide this all the way to A if you want to see it in context. If you just want to see parts of your letter under consideration that get repeated elsewhere, this is fine. This is just the hits, but you could also advance this all the way so that you can see the whole letter with the infer search run, so that it shows you where that common language occurs elsewhere. So that's 3 letters, and then you keep going with the 4th, 5th, 6th, and 7th. I've put the set of instructions here in the handout. This is the slightly easier way to set up this kind of search that requires the manual updating. So just to summarize, what we have done is we've seen how a given letter compares to the other 6, specifically what overlapping language. And I mentioned earlier, you can adjust the number after infer, so it doesn't have to be infer 6, it can be 5 or 4 or 3. And there are additional constraints that you can add to that command. If you go to the help file in accordance help here, just type in infer, and you're going to get a nice help article about that that's going to give you all the details and what are all the different components of this dialog box that comes up. So that's worth checking out. And I just wrote out here in the handout what I said verbally for future searches. Make sure the second search tab has the reference of your next letter, and so you're going to be swapping those out. Let me show you a more challenging way to set it up. And if you don't want to, I mean, if that was already a lot, you can tune out for the next 3 minutes if you want to. We're going to go to Q&A after this, but kudos to Joel Brown, longtime Accordance developer, for giving me this workspace, and then I added a little bit to it. I'm not going to set this up from scratch. I'm just going to show you what he sent me because I think it's really cool. And as Rick mentioned, we have a way to get that to you all. So it is called, I saved his workspace that he gave me, and it's called, well, now I don't have his workspace in here. Well, maybe we're going to have to skip this part of the webinar. It was a really cool workspace that he gave me. It might be in my downloads. Bear with me just a moment. I'm going to mute my screen for a minute and pull up this workspace from Joel because it's really excellent. I did not properly add it to my Accordance. All right, there it is. I've got it now. Okay, so here is what Joel sent me. This is, I'll just try to walk you through this. Basically, he did what I did, except that now you don't have to retype all of the references in the way that I did. You can just do one letter at a time up here. So you start with Revelation 2, 1 through 7. And what you've got here is that same infer search run. And then you can just go here to Revelation 2, 8 through 11. And you've got the same thing as before. I'm going to duplicate this tab here. And I'm going to even switch destination and source so that the end result, what I've got now in this workspace, and I'll try to give you a 2-minute explanation of it. Ignore the underlining, that's just from a highlight file. What I've got now in this workspace is if in the top right zone, if I type in any reference for the letter, so Revelation 8 through 11, because of these other commands that are here, what it's going to do now is it's going to show me Revelation 2. It's going to show me all of the other 6 letters right here in this infer tab right here. So that was the other 6 churches tab that we have with common language highlighted. And then I added this other tab here that's going to show me my letter, Revelation 2, 8 through 11. See, it says contents source. It's telling Accordance to reproduce this zone right here by saying contents source, but it's got and then the infer search with destination, which is the name of the tab. And so I apologize if I'm confusing you more than I'm helping you with this, but I just want to say that this workspace we've got zipped up, and we'll get it to you. And if you have questions, feel free to reach out. But what Joel did was the same process that I did, only he added the contents command and made it more automated so that now I just have to type in the reference of any one letter up here. I don't have to change it in both places. And the rest of the workspace will update so that I've got the other 6 letters here with the hits in red and bold, and then the initial letter that I'm searching right here. So that eliminates the need for that search linked text, search back link to text for. That way I can have my letter under consideration in the middle and the other 6 letters at the left, and I'm just changing the reference here. Like I say, this is making use of the contents command, which is just kind of smashing the windows together. And this is the way that Accordance answers the question. Here is what the letters have in common with each other. So for you more advanced users, I hope you have fun with this workspace. It took me a little while to figure all this out and piece it together. But like I said, we've got it zipped up. We'll send it your way. Or I think Rick said he's got a way to get that to you, and you can feel free to reach out. I think Rick said that was on the forums already. So if that's on the forums, I just ask in that in that post for questions, and I'll follow up there, and maybe if we're lucky, Joel will follow up there too if there are any questions about that. And let me head back to the last part, which is just to say on preaching and teaching Revelation. I've really talked about this all through the session already, but I've just put a couple notes here for you to take with you. The fact that Revelation is all about Jesus, both and from Jesus, that preaches really well. So you could spend a lot of time just on chapter 1, seeing what Jesus looks like, how he's depicted, and so on. I mentioned too that Revelation is all about the church and that preaches well. You can ask those questions. And now that you've used that Infer search, that gets really practical. When you ask the question, what is the Spirit saying to my church today? But both the church universal, so the 21st century church globally, the 21st century church in my country, and the 21st century church, that the particular congregation that I'm a part of. And then I'll leave you with this. We haven't talked about genre much today, but one thing you'll want to do in Revelation 1 through 3, when you're talking about Revelation as being about Jesus, is you will want to help a congregation think through the genre, or you may just want to know for yourself. And so I've just included on these last 2 slides an excursus from a sermon I gave on how Revelation is understood as a letter, as prophecy, and as apocalyptic literature, and all at the same time. And so you're welcome to just take a look at that and read through that and see that this is actual sermon text that came from study in accordance. And so if you want to see more specifically how study finds its way into the pulpit, I've put that there for you. All right, I'm going to stop there now, and I'm going to turn it over to our hosts and see if we've got any questions that have not been answered that we can answer now.
Yeah, thank you, Abram. This is Mark. Rick had to leave a little bit early, but I'll take it from here. I really appreciate your pastoral perspective. You know, a lot of us have, this is how accordance works, and there's not a whole lot of pastoral application, but I love what you do. And for those of you that got a little bit confused or freaked out about the Infer search, don't worry. I probably used accordance for about 15 years and got freaked out every time I tried to use the Infer search. So it's probably the most complex type of search that we have in accordance. And Abram, Abram and Joel provided you a really good way of being able to access it in a way that I think pastors can access it. I mean, the Infer search deals with intertextuality, and that's not something that pastors probably generally deal with. They're just trying to get their sermon ready for Sunday. But Abram, you really applied it in a way that I love, because it really is something that pastors can use as they're preparing for their Sunday sermon. So thank you for that.
Great.
Let's see here. So we've got a couple questions here, and everybody, if you haven't typed in a question yet and you'd like to, feel free to do that. Now is the perfect time. So we have one question, your opinion here. Why do many people use the NRSV Bible? Is it a word for word translation of the Bible? Do you recommend we use it when we preach?
That's a great question. Yeah, and there are a lot of different answers to that. As you know, I mean, go into any 5 churches and you'll find, 3 or 4 different versions of Pew Bible, whether it's NIV or ESV or NRSV or RSV that used to be more popular. So that's going to vary on a church-to-church basis. NRSV is, I would say, it's fairly word for word. There's always a tension in translation between presenting the original language as accurately as possible, but also in a way that's readable. So, for example, you've got, even just in Genesis 1:1, Genesis 1:1, in English, you've got God created, but in Hebrew, you have the verb that comes before the subject. So, created God, in the beginning, created God, bara Elohim, the heavens and the earth. So of course you're not going to translate that literally, because in English that wouldn't make sense. So already in even the most literal of translations, you've got to consider who's reading it, the target language, so to speak. So that's a consideration. And then of course there's a lot of room or a big spectrum for how literal and literal. I'm not sure I even like the word literal. How sometimes people use the word wooden, but how word for word are we going to be versus phrase for phrase or thought for thought? I think the NRSV is probably somewhere in the middle on that, as are a lot of popular translations. There are passages in the NRSV where I find that it doesn't capture what I might be drawing out from the original language. That's not to say, I mean, my gosh, these translators, I would be very reluctant to even sit in their presence because of their, how good they are at this stuff. So I want to be properly humble about that. At the same time, when I'm leading a Bible study, there might be another translation that pulls out a nuance of the language that I'm going to be focusing on a little bit better. So I might switch to that. I like in the NRSV that instead of mankind, there's humankind. I like the gender accuracy of that because it is, in fact, presumably men and women that are being spoken of. And that's a question of how language evolves. In the 1950s, we might not have even had that conversation, but we're learning some things. And so anyway, that's one thing I like about it. But I also like that it's sort of in the middle in that spectrum. And so it's close to the original, but also highly readable. And people have Thanksgiving dinner fights over this stuff. So I'll just stop there. And thanks for the great question.
Thank you. All right. So let's see. Do you have any other examples of passages where it might be helpful to use an infer search?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great question. Well, I think about Paul and Paul's use of the Old Testament in his letters. And so you might want to take the letter to the Ephesians, for example, and see how it overlaps with, I don't know, the book of Isaiah, for example. And so you could do an infer search and compare Ephesians to Isaiah. Certainly in the Gospels, anytime you've got a phrase like "it is written," you're going to want to know, well, where is it written? And so the infer search will generally help you with that. Sometimes the wording isn't, it might be quoted or changed in translation, or the author might have added a word in the quotation. But for the most part, the infer search is going to find that for you. So for example, you can see here in Matthew 4 that you've got Jesus saying it is written quite a bit to the devil. And so I would want to know where is that coming from, and you could do an infer search to help you with that. So I think it's useful anywhere, but especially those places where you see an author or a character start to string together lots of scripture, and that infer search can be helpful. You could also do it between, it doesn't even have to be within the Bible. Let's say you've got the apostolic fathers in accordance, so those early church theologians, and maybe you want to see, okay, that stuff didn't make it into the canonical Bible, but a lot of it sounds like the canonical Bible. Here's First Clement: may grace and peace from Almighty God through Jesus Christ be yours in abundance. Well, that could have been written by Paul. So maybe I use the infer search there to compare the apostolic fathers to Paul's letters, just to see how they continued on that language. So yeah, I would say actually endless possibilities. And I appreciate Mark saying what he said about the infer search, because Mark is usually one of the first people I go to when I have questions. So that made me feel a lot better, because this infer search has been kind of a recent rediscovery for me. And I do find myself going back to that help file quite a bit. But there's almost endless examples with the infer search. Sometimes you'll run the infer search and you'll get no results. And that's fine. Then okay, well, maybe this text and that text don't have that much overlap. But yeah, there's a lot of great possibilities there.
Thanks, Abram. And yeah, everybody remember that as long as you're running an infer search on two texts that are the same language, it'll work. So if you wanted to look at one of Paul's letters against Philo or something like that in the Greek, you can do that. For those of you that are more into the Greek or the Hebrew, and you could do the Hebrew, one of the books of the Old Testament against the Mishnah or something like that. So, okay, great. Let's see. There's a question about the SIL module that we have, versus the UBS handbooks. do you have an opinion about as far as a comparison is concerned?
Yeah.
And this person said he believed that SIL isn't any longer doing any updates. But if you have any opinion on the two.
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think they do slightly different things in the sense that the UBS Translator's Handbook really is interested in the act of translation. And so it wants to provide you with some lexical information, but it also wants you to be aware of how do these words play in different languages. And even the word apocalypse, in English, is a great example of this. We could have this translated the apocalypse of Jesus Christ, but that word, it has, I don't know if baggage is the right word. It has certain connotations for people, like the apocalypse, like I might get swallowed up tomorrow or something like that. And as I've tried to point out, that's not the main point of Revelation, but that's a question of interpretation. And so similarly, the translators' handbooks, they're great about saying, here's how this might work in other cultures, in other languages, particularly because language and culture is so intertwined. So the UBS handbook does more of that. I think the SIL series is more, I think it's more thorough in terms of word by word and these sorts of grammatical questions. There's going to be a lot of overlap between these two resources, but I'd say probably a little bit more detail, at least as I've used it. This is what I've found, more detail in the SIL series. And then the translator's handbook, it actually is really helpful for preaching because, even if I'm not translating from one language to another when I preach, I still need to think about how is this heard when I say it. And so the translator's handbook is really good about thinking through that kind of thing.
Thanks, Abram. And let me just say, I really appreciated that one of the modules that you looked at were the net notes. And I love the net notes because they deal with translator issues from a very accessible kind of perspective. The USB handbook is well, let me say the net notes are kind of like a Reader's Digest condensed version of the UBS translator's notes. And one of the reasons I love the SIL exegetical summary series, and it's one of my favorite commentaries, is because it sort of condenses what almost all the major commentaries have to say on any particular issue. So you may not have some of these commentaries, but you can access what they have to say based on what the SIL exegetical summary says. So even though the SIL exegetical summary doesn't deal with every single book in the Bible because it isn't comprehensive, and I'm not sure they're going to update it. I wish they would. I think it's a money issue. What they have is amazing. So just my 2 cents there.
Well said.
All right. Also, how do you turn on and off the section headings?
Oh yeah, great question. It's funny. I just today updated to 13.2. I'm a little bit late on that, and so I guess that's a confession to the other accordance folks. I probably should have been beta testing it. But anyway, so I'm new to the section headings, but they're easy to turn off. If you go to the gear icon and set text pane display, you can see a keyboard shortcut here, and then go to advanced. It's right here under contents, show book titles, show section headings. And those are 2 separate things. In fact, you can see here, here's my book title, and here's my section heading. Now, these are not very, if you're searching Revelation 1:1, Revelation showing up here doesn't really help you. If you were reading straight through this, that does help you, but that's up to you, obviously. So set text pane display, and then you can turn off one or both of those here in the contents. And now it looks like one continuous text, which is how it's been for 26 years, Mark, 27 years until now.
Yeah, I think so. Been a couple of years since we had our 25th anniversary, so that sounds right. Yeah, accordance has always been so text-centric that even things like pericope headings or section headings have been sort of almost considered frivolous, but many of us, including me, have been asking for them for many, many, many years. So we're all happy that they're finally in there.
That's right.
All right, great. Last question. Oh, by the way, with the section headings, what Abram just showed you is how to turn them off book by book or text by text. But if you go to your accordance preferences, your general preferences, you can turn them off on, yeah, there you go, on all your text all at one time. So there you go. Yep, same thing. All right. Last question, I think, unless someone else wants to pop something up here. All right. Regarding John, what is your view regarding the beloved disciple versus the presbyter, given the odd Greek grammar and this person is thinking in Hebrew? Do you have any opinion on that?
That is a really
good... the beloved disciple versus the presbyter, given the odd Greek grammar. I'm not exactly what that's a reference.
And I'm not sure either in terms of the Greek grammar. Funnily enough, one of the things that got me preaching Revelation was I read it through in Greek a few years ago, and I was surprised by how well I understood a lot of it, especially as compared to like Hebrews or First Peter in terms of the Greek. So, but yeah, I mean, certainly there's the grammar to consider, but in terms of vocabulary, I found it pretty readable. I guess I would just say, in the interest of time, that and this is not directly answering your question, but I think often when I'm faced with a question like this, what I like to do is to say, study every commentary I can find, and then say in a sermon, I might say, here are a couple of possibilities for authorship if it's not abundantly clear, or if it's a letter typically attributed to Paul, I would say, traditionally this letter has been attributed to Paul. Some people think it's a disciple of his, but the traditional view that I hold to is that it's Paul or something like that. So I might, if there were a question like that, I might even just say, I might just sort of present multiple possibilities. But yeah, in terms of answering this question, well, and not only that, but you've got another question here. Beale notes this, whether it was written by one hand or the product of a number of writers. And then you've got the consensus here. And then, of course, here is the very question that's being asked. I don't know. I have to give you an I don't know on that.
Thanks. And yeah, Chuck clarified it, and you answered, I think, his question. He was talking about the Greek grammar in Revelation being vastly different from the Gospel of John. So
I see.
Yeah.